General Aiden Drax stood at the edge of the Solara fortress, staring out across the barren wasteland. The once vibrant planet was now a graveyard of crumbling buildings and shattered landscapes, remnants of humanity's former glory. The last of Earth's military might was gathered here in a desperate stand against the Vrax, an alien coalition that had swept through the galaxy like a plague. Drax's face was grim, the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. With each passing day, the Vrax grew stronger and humanity grew weaker. Time was running out. The war had raged for decades. Entire colonies had been wiped from existence, and what remained of human civilization was slowly being suffocated under the boot of the Vrax Empire. But this fortress, Solara, was humanity's last defense. It was their final hope. "General, we have a situation." A voice interrupted Drax's thoughts. It was Captain Rhys Jansen, one of his most trusted officers. Rhys' face was streaked with dirt, and his eyes showed signs of sleeplessness. The captain was as hardened as they come, but even he couldn't hide his growing worry. Drax turned to face him. "What's the news, Captain?" "The Vrax fleet. It's moving in. This is it. They're on their way to finalize the siege. They gathered everything they have. Their ships are massive, far beyond anything we've encountered," Rhys said, his voice tight with urgency. A chill ran down Drax's spine. The Vrax were known for their overwhelming numbers and brutal tactics. This wasn't just a raid. It was an extinction-level attack. The Vrax were coming to end the human race, once and for all. Drax's mind raced. He had been fighting for years, commanding some of the most legendary tactical strikes ever seen, but he had never faced an enemy so relentless. The Omega Generals, his team of hand-picked, elite commanders, had turned the tide in countless battles, but now even their skills seemed insufficient. The odds were stacked too high. "We need to act, General," Rhys urged, sensing Drax's hesitation. Drax took a deep breath and nodded. "Prepare the forces. It's time for one final strike." The plan was risky, even suicidal. They would launch a raid on a Vrax supply depot located near the heart of their fleet. The depot contained supplies critical to their operation, and if they could destroy it, the Vrax would be forced to delay their attack on Solara. It was a desperate gamble, a small hope in a sea of hopelessness, but it was the only chance humanity had left. Drax strode to the war room, where the other Omega Generals were already gathered. Seraphine Rook, the strategist and master of deception, was leaning over a holographic map, studying the Vrax fleet's movements. Marcus Kane, the brutal frontline commander, was sharpening his blade, his expression unreadable. Kalen Storm, the quiet yet deadly sharpshooter, stood by the window, his eyes scanning the horizon, waiting for a sign of the incoming enemy. "We've got one shot at this," Drax said as he entered the room. "We strike tonight." Seraphine looked up, her sharp blue eyes locking onto Drax. "It's a long shot. We'll be outnumbered 10-1. Our best bet is to hit them fast and hard, before they realize we're coming." Marcus grunted in agreement. "I say we crush them. No mercy." Drax nodded but remained focused. "We're not just crushing them. We're sending a message. We fight for every inch of this galaxy. If we don't win this, they'll come for us next." The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled in. Kalen turned from the window, his cold eyes meeting Drax's. "Let's give them hell," he said. Drax felt the surge of resolve from his fellow generals. In that moment, he knew they were ready. No matter the odds, no matter the cost, they would fight. Together. "Let's make history," Drax said, his voice low but filled with fire. The hum of the Solara fortress seemed to intensify as the hours ticked by. The Omega Generals prepared for the raid. Drax was in the command center, going over every detail of the operation. The plan had been set, but doubts lingered like a shadow in the corners of his mind. The Vrax were ruthless, and their technology far surpassed anything humanity had developed. Even with their best forces, victory was a slim hope. And if the raid failed, the consequences would be catastrophic, not just for Solara, but for the last remnants of humanity. "General," came a voice from behind him. It was Seraphine Rook, the brilliant tactician who had masterminded most of their victories. Her sharp eyes were scanning the screens, her mind always working, always calculating. "What's on your mind?" Drax asked, not turning around. "I've been thinking," Seraphine began, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "This is the last chance we have, but I wonder, are we doing the right thing? We're gambling everything on this strike. If it fails, we're finished." Drax stopped, finally turning to face her. Her concern mirrored his own, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. "Not now." "I know," he said quietly, "but we have no choice. The Vraks are coming, and they'll finish us off. This is our only shot. If we pull this off, even if it's just a small victory, it might buy us the time we need. We can regroup. We can fight back." Seraphine met his gaze, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she nodded. "You're right. But this plan, it's reckless. It's not just the Vraks we have to worry about. There's something else at play here." Drax raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, glancing around the room as if checking for eavesdroppers. "There's been talk. Rumors. Some of our own soldiers. They're not exactly loyal anymore. There's whispers of rebellion. People are starting to question our leadership." Drax's chest tightened, the weight of her words sinking in. A rebellion. In the middle of a war they were losing. It was a nightmare he hadn't even dared to consider. "Who?" he asked, his voice low but filled with urgency. Seraphine shrugged. "I don't know yet, but the signs are there. Some of the younger officers, ones who haven't seen the kind of bloodshed we have. They're starting to wonder if we're fighting for a cause worth dying for. And there are rumors that Colonel Tarek is involved." Tarek. Drax's mind flicked back to the tall, imposing figure of Colonel Evelyn Tarek, a trusted officer, someone who had been with him through some of the most brutal campaigns. But if what Seraphine said was true, there was no telling how deep her loyalty ran. "Get me her file," Drax ordered, his voice sharp. "I'll handle it." Seraphine nodded and immediately left to gather the intel. Drax couldn't help but feel a sickening sense of dread coil in his stomach. Tarek had always been a pillar of strength, someone he relied on. The thought that she might be plotting against him now sent a chill through his spine. As the minutes ticked by, the preparations for the raid continued. Drax glanced at the clock. In an hour, the assault would begin. But first, he needed to confront Tarek. There was no room for doubt now. The war against the Vraks was already a brutal game of survival, and the last thing they needed was a traitor in their midst. Just then, Race entered the command center. "General, everything's set. The teams are ready to deploy." Drax gave a curt nod, his mind still racing. "We proceed as planned. But I need to speak with Tarek before we go." Riz looked confused. "Tarek?" "Sir, there's no time for that. We need to move." "I said I need to speak with her." Drax's voice was hard, the steel in his tone leaving no room for argument. Riz paused, sensing the change in the air. "Understood, sir." As Rice departed to relay the orders, Drax took a moment to steady his thoughts. The Vraks were closing in. His forces were prepared, but the true battle was beginning. Not just against the enemy, but within. The cracks in the foundation of their unity were starting to show, and soon enough, he'd find out just how deep the betrayal ran. But for now, he had a raid to lead. Time was running out. The air was thick with tension as Drax strode down the dimly lit corridor, his boots echoing against the metal floor. The fortified halls of Solara were a far cry from the quiet military precision he had once known. Now there was only a sense of urgency and dread. The countdown to the raid had begun, and every step felt like the ticking of a clock, louder with each passing second. His mind was split between the mission at hand and the confrontation with Tarek that he could no longer avoid. Colonel Evelyn Terrick was waiting for him in the briefing room, her posture straight, her eyes unreadable. She had always been a rock, unshakable, resolute. But now, as Drax stood before her, something about her was different. Her gaze didn't quite meet his, and the coldness in her demeanor was unsettling. "You wanted to see me, General." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, something almost too controlled. Drax didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've been hearing rumors, Terrick. Rumors that you've been speaking against the command structure. Against me." His words cut through the silence like a blade. Terrick's eyes flickered for just a moment, but her expression remained stone cold. "I don't know what you're talking about, General. There's been no dissent from me, if that's what you're implying." Drax narrowed his gaze, stepping closer. He could feel the weight of the tension hanging in the air. "There's a rebellion brewing within the ranks, and I'm starting to think you're involved." Terrick's eyes darkened, but she didn't flinch. "I've been with you since the beginning, Drax. You know I'd never turn on humanity. My loyalty is to the cause. Always has been." Drax studied her, searching for any sign of truth or deception. His instincts, honed through years of battle, screamed at him to be careful. She had been his right hand, his most trusted officer, but trust in wartime was a fragile thing. He couldn't afford to let it blind him now. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. "I hope you're telling the truth, Colonel," Drax said, his voice low but unwavering. "Because if there's any truth to these rumors, I won't hesitate to act. The Vraks are on their way, and I can't afford to have a traitor in my midst." For a brief moment, Terrick's gaze faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. "I understand, General. I swear to you, my loyalty has never wavered. Let's focus on the mission. We've got a war to win, after all." Drax didn't trust her words entirely, but he couldn't afford to waste time questioning her further. Not when the raid was about to begin. "All right. You're with us, then. Get your squad ready. The strike team departs in 15 minutes. Terrick nodded sharply, her face a mask of professionalism. "Understood, sir." As she turned to leave, Drax watched her back, the doubt still gnawing at the edge of his thoughts. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but there was no turning back now. The raid had to happen. Within moments, the war room erupted into a flurry of activity. Officers and soldiers scrambled to finalize preparations. Drax's strike team, a hand-picked group of the best soldiers in the galaxy, was ready to move. Among them was Seraphine, sharp as ever, with her mind already processing the best routes for infiltration. Marcus, ever the brute, was cracking his knuckles, eager for the fight. Helen, the sharpshooter, was calibrating his weapons with deadly precision. Drax joined his team, his resolve hardening. They were heading straight into the heart of Vrak's territory. The mission was simple: sabotage their supply depot, destroy any resources they could find, and cripple the Vraks' ability to continue their siege on Solara. But the risks were enormous. They would be outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded by an enemy who would stop at nothing to obliterate them. "We hit fast and hard," Drax said, his voice unwavering. "In and out. We don't leave anything standing." The team nodded, their faces grim but determined. As the final preparations were made, Drax took a moment to glance at the sky through the reinforced windows of the command center. The distant stars seemed cold and indifferent, a reminder of just how far humanity had fallen. "Let's make it count," Drax muttered to himself. With that, the team moved out, and the air was filled with the sounds of boots pounding down the hallways, weapons being checked, and the hum of the transport ships preparing for launch. This would be the beginning of either humanity's last stand or its final fall. And no matter what, Drax knew one thing: there would be no turning back. The transport ships shuddered as they blasted off, rocketing through the turbulent atmosphere of Solara. Drax's strike team sat in silence, the weight of their mission hanging over them. The darkness outside seemed endless, broken only by the occasional flash of distant stars. Inside, the quiet hum of the ship did little to calm the nerves of the crew. They were about to cross into enemy territory, into the heart of the Vrax's war machine. Seraphine Rook sat opposite Drax, her eyes glued to the holographic display that mapped out the Vrax supply depot's layout. Her fingers danced across the interface, marking escape routes and potential points of vulnerability. Her mind was always working, always calculating. Beside her, Marcus Kane was flipping a combat knife between his hands, his expression unreadable. The massive frontline commander was a man of few words, but the tension in his jaw spoke volumes. On the other side, Callan Storm adjusted his sniper rifle, his sharp eyes never straying from the window. The sharpshooter was always alert, always watching for any sign of danger. The team had only one goal: infiltrate the heavily guarded Vrax depot, sabotage their supplies, and escape before they could be overwhelmed. The Vrax would not give up easily, and Drax knew that every minute they spent behind enemy lines brought them closer to disaster. As the ship descended into the shadowed ruins of a once thriving human colony, Drax couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air was thick with an unsettling energy, as if the planet itself had been drained of hope. A dark storm churned above the ruined city, casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to reach out like hands. "We're approaching the target," Seraphine's voice broke the silence, her eyes narrowing as she double-checked the ship's approach. "In position for deployment. We move fast." Drax nodded. "Everyone knows their assignments. We hit the depot hard and fast. No hesitations." The ship touched down with a heavy thud, and the ramp descended, allowing the strike team to spill into the crumbling streets. The city was eerily quiet, too quiet. The only sounds were the distant howls of the wind and the occasional crack of debris shifting in the dust. The remains of buildings, once filled with human life, now stood as hollow monuments to the war. The Vrax had taken everything, and they were determined to take the rest. "Stay sharp," Drax ordered as he scanned the area, his eyes flicking back and forth for any sign of movement. "We don't know what kind of resistance we're dealing with." They moved quickly through the ruins, their boots making soft thuds as they crossed cracked pavement and broken glass. Every corner felt like a trap, every shadow a potential ambush. But there was no time to second-guess. The depot was only a few kilometers away, and the clock was ticking. As they neared the depot, something strange caught Drax's eye. In the distance, barely visible through the haze, a faint glow flickered from the heart of the Vrax stronghold. It wasn't the usual cold, alien technology he'd come to expect. It was something different. Something old. His heart skipped a beat as his instincts screamed at him to turn back, but there was no time. The mission had to be completed. "We're close," Callan whispered, his voice low and steady. "Visual on the depot. No movement so far." Drax's hand tightened around the hilt of his weapon. "Move in. We hit hard. We hit fast." As the team approached the depot, they encountered their first real resistance. A Vrax patrol emerged from the shadows, their metallic bodies gleaming in the pale light. The strike team wasted no time. Kalen's sniper rifle cracked, the sound echoing in the still air, and one of the Vrax soldiers dropped, a clean shot to the head. Marcus charged forward, his massive frame a blur of motion, as he tore through their ranks with brutal efficiency. Seraphine directed their movements, covering the flanks and ensuring no one was caught off guard. But just as they were about to breach the depot's outer perimeter, they encountered something unexpected: a hidden chamber buried beneath the ruins of the depot. The entrance was covered in thick alien hieroglyphs, glowing faintly as if calling out to them. The ground seemed to hum with an ancient energy. "What is this?" Drax muttered, his voice tense. He wasn't sure what they had just uncovered, but the relic was there, beneath their feet, buried in the earth, waiting to be unearthed. Seraphine stepped forward cautiously, scanning the area with a wary eye. "This isn't part of the original plan. We're not here for alien artifacts." But Drax couldn't ignore the pull. Something in him, something deep and primal, told him that the relic was tied to their future. It could be their salvation or their doom. "We're taking it," Drax said, his voice steady despite the unease that gripped him. "Whatever it is, we're not leaving it behind." As the team began to unearth the ancient relic, a chill swept through the air, and the ground seemed to tremble. The very fabric of reality around them felt unstable, as if something old, something powerful, was awakening. They had just unlocked the door to something that might change the course of the war and humanity's future. But what lay ahead was far darker than any of them could have predicted. Drax's heart pounded. The relic, whatever it was not just a weapon. It was a curse waiting to be unleashed. The ancient relic, now exposed to the dim light of their flashlights, was unlike anything Drax had ever seen. Its surface was covered in strange, pulsating symbols, constantly shifting like they were alive, as if they were trying to communicate. The relic's shape was oblong and smooth, not metallic but almost organic in nature, radiating an energy that hummed in the air. The ground beneath it seemed to vibrate with the force of some unseen power, and for a moment, Drax couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something far beyond the comprehension of any human or alien mind. "General, we need to be careful," Seraphine warned, her voice tight with apprehension. "This thing, it's not just technology. It feels like it's alive." Drax turned to face her, his face hard. "I know, but we don't have the luxury of time. The Vrax will be on us in minutes. We need to get this back to the ship now." Seraphine hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "Agreed. But if we're going to do this, we need to be cautious. The last thing we want is to trigger something we don't understand." As the rest of the team gathered around, Marcus Kane bent down and reached toward the relic, his hand steady despite the strange, almost magnetic pull it seemed to have. Drax felt a cold shiver run up his spine. Marcus wasn't just touching it. He was connecting with it in a way that defied all explanation. For a brief second, Drax saw a flash of something in Marcus's eyes, something not quite human. "Marcus." Drax barked, but it was too late. The moment Marcus's fingers made contact with the relic, the ground beneath them trembled violently. The sound of grinding metal echoed through the chamber as the walls seemed to shift. A deep, reverberating hum filled the air, and the symbols on the relic began to glow brighter, the light intensifying until it nearly blinded them. "What the hell is happening?" Ray shouted, his voice filled with panic as the chamber began to shake violently. Drax instinctively grabbed his weapon and took a defensive stance, ready for anything, but the shaking didn't stop. It only grew worse. "We need to get out of here. Now," Seraphine shouted, her face pale with fear. Before anyone could react, the ground exploded beneath their feet, sending debris and dust into the air. The chamber was collapsing, the walls cracking open like the skin of an ancient creature. From the wreckage, a massive surge of dark energy shot up, enveloping the team. The air grew thick with a foul, unnatural presence, and Drax felt a chill claw its way into his very bones. Then, as quickly as it had begun, everything stopped. The shaking ceased. The hum died down, and the room fell silent. Drax, heart racing, scanned the team. Everyone was still standing, but something had changed. Marcus's eyes, once a deep brown, were now a strange shade of black. His pupils were wide, dilated, and in his expression was something distant, something not quite his own. What's happening to him?" Rise asked, his voice shaking. Drax stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for Marcus. "Marcus." The massive soldier didn't respond at first. He simply stared into space, his face blank. Then, slowly, he turned to face Drax. His voice, when it came, was distorted, as if it was being filtered through something ancient and alien. "The relic. It is awake. It remembers." Marcus's voice was cold, hollow, like it came from a place far beyond human understanding. Drax's gut clenched with fear. This wasn't Marcus. This was something else entirely. Something that had been awakened by their touch. "What do you mean?" Drax demanded, trying to remain composed. "What did you see?" Marcus's lips twisted into a twisted grin, though his eyes betrayed no hint of humanity. "I saw the Vracs. And worse. They were never the true enemies. The relic is part of something older. Something that has been waiting for eons. And now it has chosen us." Drax's pulse quickened. The situation was spiraling out of control faster than he could comprehend. "What did you release, Marcus?" he asked, fear creeping into his voice. Before Marcus could answer, the ground shook once more, but this time it wasn't just the chamber. The entire city seemed to tremble. Outside, the sky flickered with bursts of light, like distant stars imploding, and a deep, rumbling sound echoed from beneath the planet's crust. "Drax," Seraphine said urgently, her face pale. "We need to leave. Now. We've awakened something far worse than the Vracs." Drax didn't need to hear more. He turned to his team, adrenaline surging through him. "Move out. Get to the ship. We have to get back to Solara. Now." But as they turned to leave, Drax couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't just uncovered a weapon. They had opened a doorway to something far older and far more dangerous. Whatever it was already awake, and it wasn't going to stop until it consumed everything in its path. And now, they were part of that path. The air outside the collapsing Vrax depot was thick with smoke and dust, and the ground shook beneath their feet as Drax's team sprinted toward the transport ship. Every step felt like an eternity, the oppressive weight of the unknown pressing down on them. Marcus, still under the influence of the relic, moved with eerie precision. His once human movements now mechanical, almost predatory. "Move faster," Drax ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. But his eyes kept darting to Marcus, who walked in eerie sync with the pulse of the planet beneath them. Seraphine's sharp eyes flicked between their surroundings, and the man now possessed by the relic. "He's not himself anymore, Drax. We need to figure out what the hell happened before it's too late." Drax gritted his teeth but kept moving. There wasn't time for answers, not yet. They were running out of it. The transport ship loomed ahead, but just as they neared it, the air around them grew even colder, the vibrations from the planet intensifying. A screeching, low hum echoed through the streets, reverberating off the shattered ruins of the once thriving city. Something ancient and monstrous stirred beneath the surface, and Drax could feel it. Feel it pulling at the very fabric of their reality. It wasn't just the relic anymore. It was as if the entire planet had become sentient, alive with malevolent energy. "Get in the ship now," Drax yelled, pushing his team into motion. His hand was already on his weapon, every sense honed to danger. They reached the ramp of the ship and scrambled inside, the doors closing with a heavy thud as soon as the last member of the team cleared the threshold. As the ship roared to life, lifting off the ground, Drax took a moment to glance at Marcus. The man's face was a mask, eyes wide and vacant, pupils completely black. A dark aura clung to him, the energy emanating from his body pulsing in sync with the storm outside the ship's hull. "Marcus, talk to me," Drax demanded, his voice cutting through the tension. "What happened down there?" Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he turned his head slowly, and for a moment, Drax thought he saw something. Something darker, lurking behind those black eyes. The ship jerked, and Seraphine's voice snapped Drax's attention away. "We've got incoming, and it's not Vrax." Drax's eyes widened. The hum of the planet had grown louder, and now there were ripples in the sky, like a ripple in water, distorting the stars. A series of dark, jagged shapes began to form in the distance, coalescing into monstrous silhouettes. Ships, alien but not Vrax. Fast and sleek, their designs entirely foreign. "We've got company," Drax muttered under his breath. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The ship banked sharply to the side as the alien craft closed in with terrifying speed. The unknown attackers were on them in seconds, energy blasts lighting up the blackness of space, narrowly missing the ship. Drax slammed his hand down on the weapons console, ordering a defensive barrage. "Brace for impact," he shouted, and the ship rocked as an energy blast hit their shields. The force sent the team stumbling, but they kept their footing. Outside the windows, Drax saw them, the alien ships, as dark and malevolent as the relic itself. They were different, something old and ancient in their design, reminiscent of the relic's unsettling power. "These aren't Frax," Seraphine shouted. "There's something else, something far worse." Drax felt his pulse spike. The relic they had unearthed, the one Marcus had activated, was drawing the attention of a force that he didn't understand, one far beyond the Vrax. The ground had trembled beneath their feet because of it. The storm above them had erupted because of it. And now this alien fleet was chasing them, not just to kill, but to retrieve whatever they had unleashed. "We can't outrun them. We need to fight back." Kellen growled, already loading his weapon and eyeing the external cameras for a clear shot. "No, we can't afford to engage them yet," Drax snapped. "We need to get out of the atmosphere. We can't let them disable us here. Solara's not far. We're almost there." As the ship ascended, the unknown alien fleet followed closely, relentless in their pursuit. Their weapons fired again, this time grazing the ship's hull. The blast caused sparks to fly from the control panels, and the ship lurched dangerously. "We're losing power," Seraphine called out, her fingers flying over the systems, trying to stabilize their descent. Drax's grip tightened on the seat, the realization dawning on him. Whatever they had disturbed on the surface, whatever Marcus had awakened, was calling out. They weren't just running from enemies. They were running from something ancient, something that had been lying dormant. And now its guardians were awake. And the hunt had begun. The ship shuddered as another wave of alien fire hammered into their hull. Sparks flew from the damaged systems, and the sound of creaking metal echoed through the cockpit. Drax gripped the control panel, his knuckles turning white. They were in freefall now, the engine sputtering as the ship began its descent into the atmosphere of Solara. "We're going down." Seraphine's voice was sharp with panic, but she quickly fought to maintain control. "I can't get the systems back online. We're losing altitude." Drax's eyes darted to Marcus, who remained eerily still in his seat. The black void of his eyes stared ahead, unblinking, and his expression was utterly void of recognition. He was no longer the man Drax had known. The relic had changed him, twisted him into something unrecognizable. "What happened to you, Marcus?" Drax muttered, half to himself, as the ship plummeted toward the surface. The alien ships were closing in fast, their sleek, angular forms cutting through the atmosphere with an unnatural grace. They were relentless, like predators on the hunt, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they came for. Drax had no illusions about that. Whoever, or whatever, had sent them wasn't interested in negotiation or diplomacy. They had a singular purpose, and it was linked to the relic Marcus had triggered. "Get us out of here," Kellen yelled from the rear of the ship, his voice tense. "We can't take much more of this." Drax's mind raced. They couldn't escape. They couldn't outrun them. Their only chance now was to make a stand. He grabbed the weapon console and activated the ship's remaining offensive systems. A low hum filled the air as the targeting system powered up, and Drax's fingers flew over the controls. "We're not running anymore. If we're going down fighting." The ship's weapons fired, launching a series of laser beams toward the lead alien vessel. The shots hit their target with a burst of brilliant blue energy, but the alien ships barely flinched. It was like they were made of something stronger than anything the humans had ever encountered. "We're not even scratching them," Seraphine yelled, her eyes wide with disbelief as the alien ships simply continued their descent, unharmed. "Focus fire on the engines," Drax ordered, trying to think of any way to disable them. The alien ship's technology was far beyond anything they had seen. They were outgunned, outmatched, and on the edge of desperation. But then, as the ship neared the surface, Drax saw something that made his blood run cold. The relic, still with Marcus, still connected to him, began to pulse again, brighter this time, as if answering the call of the alien fleet. The strange hum that had filled the ship grew louder, and for a brief moment, Drax thought he heard a whisper, a voice speaking from somewhere beyond the stars. "They are coming for you, General. They are the guardians of the gate. And the gate will open." The voice sent a chill through Drax's bones. He glanced at Marcus again. The man was now fully immersed in whatever dark force the relic had unleashed. The alien ships were not merely chasing them. They were responding to the power Marcus had inadvertently awakened. Seraphine looked at Drax, her expression grim. "It's too late, Drax. We've already triggered something. And now they're here to claim it. They're not just after us. They're after whatever Marcus has become." Drax's mind raced. The relic, the alien ships, Marcus. This was bigger than they had ever imagined. The hunt was no longer just about survival. It was about something far older, something waiting for eons to awaken. And now, they had unwittingly become the prey. Suddenly, the ship lurched, and Drax's heart skipped a beat. They had broken through the atmosphere, and the alien fleet wasn't far behind. He could see the surface of Solara now, a craggy wasteland of ruins and scorched earth. "There's nowhere left to run," Drax said grimly. "Prepare for impact." The alien ships closed in, their weapons charging for one final strike. The relic's energy surged again, and Drax could feel the air growing colder, thicker, as if the very atmosphere was being warped by the power of the relic. It was as if reality itself was beginning to bend and twist, and Drax could feel something dark rising from beneath the surface of the planet. He looked out the viewport, and the ground was now rushing up toward them. "Brace for impact," Drax shouted, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't going to survive this. The ship slammed into the surface with a bone-jarring thud. The impact sent a shockwave through the wreckage, and the world outside erupted in a brilliant burst of light and energy. Everything was a blur of motion, chaos, and destruction. But then, in the aftermath of the crash, Drax realized something. The planet itself was no longer just a place. It was a battleground, an ancient, forgotten battlefield. And the relic, it wasn't just a weapon. It was the key to something far older and far more dangerous than anything they had ever faced. The alien ships circled above them, waiting, watching. And the true enemy, it was not just the Vrax. It was the awakening of an ancient power, one that would stop at nothing to reclaim what had been lost. Drax understood then. There was no running. They were already part of something much larger, a force that was coming for them all. Drax's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts as the wrecked transport lay in the smoldering ruins of Solara's surface. His body ached from the crash, but he pushed the pain aside, forcing himself to focus. The alien ships hovered above like vultures, their weapons crackling with energy, ready to finish what they had started. But something in the air had changed, something more terrifying than any of the weapons aimed at them. The relic. It pulsed with an overwhelming intensity, its energy reverberating through the very ground they stood on. Drax could feel the presence of something immense, something ancient. The relic wasn't just a weapon. It was a portal, a gateway to a power that had been dormant for millennia. And now it was awakening. "Get up now," Drax barked, his voice sharp, as he scrambled out of the wreckage. The team groaned and staggered to their feet, visibly shaken from the crash, but they obeyed. There was no time to waste. Marcus, still under the relic's influence, stood motionless beside them, staring into the distance. His eyes, once brown, once human, were now entirely black, empty pools of darkness. The alien presence inside him had taken full control. His fingers twitched, as though beckoning the relic, as if it had become part of him. "Drax," Seraphine called, her voice frantic. "We need to stop him. We can't let Marcus be the key to whatever's coming. If we don't stop this, it'll destroy everything." Drax turned to her, his jaw set in determination. "I know, but we need to buy ourselves time. We need to figure out how to shut down the relic before it pulls us all into whatever dark abyss it's opening." As he spoke, the ground beneath their feet rumbled once more, the planet itself reacting to the relic's call. The alien ships hovered, unwilling to engage directly, yet their weapons crackled, waiting for a signal. "Drax," Marcus spoke, his voice not his own. It was a distorted, hollow sound that sent a shiver down Drax's spine. "They are here. The Guardians. They are waiting." The air shimmered above the relic, and from the depths of the planet's surface, a dark shape began to emerge. It was massive, almost incomprehensible in size. Something vast and primordial, an entity that had slumbered for eons, hidden beneath the layers of Solara's broken surface. Drax's breath caught in his throat as the entity rose, a swirling mass of shadow and energy, its form indistinct, shifting as if it were constantly reshaping itself. And yet there was an unmistakable sense of ancient intelligence behind its movements, a force of nature that had been unleashed by their very actions. "Whatever this is," Seraphine whispered, her eyes wide with horror, "we've awoken a god." The entity's form began to solidify, a towering figure of darkness. It loomed over them, impossibly large, its glowing eyes fixated on Marcus, who stood motionless, the relic still pulsing in his hand. The ground shook again, and with it, the air grew thick with the presence of something beyond the scope of their understanding. The alien fleet began to fire, but it was futile. The shots seemed to dissipate in midair as the entity's energy field expanded, a shield of darkness that absorbed and deflected all attacks. Drax's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the truth. They had unwittingly unleashed an unimaginable force, and now they were caught in its grip. "No," Drax muttered, his voice cracking with disbelief. "This wasn't supposed to happen." In that moment, the entity's focus shifted to Drax, and he felt an unbearable weight settle over him, as if the very air itself had become an anchor, pulling him into the abyss. The shadows closed in around him, and for a brief second, he thought he saw the face of the entity, a monstrous, unearthly visage with glowing eyes, staring directly at him. But then something unexpected happened. The relic's energy flared, a sharp, blinding burst of light that seemed to challenge the dark power before them. Marcus jerked, his body convulsing as if something was trying to break free. The blackness in his eyes flickered, and for the briefest of moments, Drax saw a flicker of the man he had once called a friend. "Drax," Marcus's voice was weak, strained. "It's too late, but there's still time to stop it." The alien ships hesitated, as though sensing the change in the atmosphere. The entity paused, its form writhing, confused by the disruption in its awakening. The relic, the key to this dark power, had become unstable, and the energy it radiated was no longer in the control of the force that had unleashed it. Drax's mind raced. This was their chance. He didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbing the relic from Marcus's limp hands, feeling its power thrumming beneath his touch. He could feel the dark energy coiling inside it, trying to break free. But Drax held on. His team gathered around him, backing him up. "We need to close the gate," Drax shouted, more to himself than anyone else. "We have to reverse the activation. Now." Seraphine's eyes met his, and with a wordless understanding, they acted in unison. Together, they channeled every bit of strength they had left, focusing on the relic, pulling it toward them with all their will. For a brief moment, the air seemed to crackle with energy, light and dark colliding in a spectacular display. And then, with a final, deafening roar, the relic's energy surged one last time. The entity screamed, an otherworldly, bone-chilling sound that echoed through the very core of Solara. And then, just as quickly, it imploded in on itself, its dark form collapsing into nothingness. The alien ships, sensing their failure, retreated, vanishing into the distance. The ground stopped shaking. The air cleared, and the silence that followed was deafening. Drax sank to his knees, exhausted, the relic now inert in his hands. They had done it. They had stopped the unimaginable from consuming everything. But as he looked around at his team, at Marcus, who now lay unconscious at his feet, Drax knew that their fight was far from over. They had closed one gate, but there were others. And the relic's power, no matter how dormant it seemed, had only just begun to show its true nature. The war was not over, but for now, they had survived.